Welcome to the latest episode of Papal Profiles. This week, we look at a man who was arguably one of the most influential men in world history. Born in a small town in France between 940 to 950, Gerbert of Aurillac would revolutionize how math and science were taught in Western Europe, including teaching many of the leading noble and churchmen of his era, conspire to change the King of France, ally with the Holy Roman Emperor to create a new Rome, get himself excommunicated, made Pope, and then chased out of Rome by a rival faction. If that sounds interesting to you, then join me for a look at Pope Sylvester II. Unlike other videos in this series, this segment will focus on what Sylvester II did before becoming Pope rather than covering his papal tenure. That Gerbert of Aurillac is not better known in world history is a shame, as he was one of the most scientifically gifted and best-educated men of his age. Gerbert first attended a Benedictine monastery, and while there are many legends of how this boy of humble birth came to be accepted, what matters to history is that the monks took in and trained this remarkable young budding scholar. By 967, a chance meeting would change his life, and the course of Western European history, forever. In 967, Gerbert would have been in his late teens or early 20s, and his monastic teachers had exhausted what little knowledge they had to pass on, when Count Borrell of Barcelona visited the monastery. The Counts of Barcelona were Christian vassals of the Frankish Empire in Catalonia, a region in the northeast corner of the Iberian Peninsula adjacent to the territories of Muslim Andalusia. At this time in France, there were no instructors to teach the quadrivium of the 7 liberal arts, or arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. A biographer of Gerbert records the momentous conversation that took place, as the abbot of the monastery asked the count if there were any scholars in Spain who could instruct young Gerbert, to which the count said yes. The abbot then asked the count to take Gerbert with him to Barcelona to study math and science. Consequently, Gerbert would master the quadrivium from 967 to 970 in Spain, in addition to studying the great works of the Islamic Golden Age and making connections with other scholars there. On leaving Spain in December 970, it was to Rome that he went next. Gerbert so impressed the Pope that the Pope informed Otto the Great of the young scholar's talent, and he was sent to court to be a tutor to the teenaged Otto II. By 972, Otto II had married the Byzantine princess, Theophanu. Otto no longer had need of a tutor and Gerbert needed a new job. As it happened, the Archbishop of Reims was looking for talented scholars to teach at his important cathedral school, the cathedral where kings were crowned, and noblemen trained for the church or imperial service. So, it was to Reims, northeast of Paris, where Gerbert would teach for almost 20 years what he had learned from the Muslim and Jewish scholars in Andalusia. During that time, Gerbert trained many of the brightest minds of the next generation who flocked to the school to learn these radically new ideas, and they would go on to disseminate that new information. Among those Gerbert taught was the future Pope Gregory VI, 13 bishops, 6 abbots of major monasteries, men who would hold senior roles at court, and the future Holy Roman Emperor Otto III and King Robert II of France. One of Gerbert's most famous students was Fulbert of Chartres. As Bologna specialized in law, Fulbert would establish Chartres as one of the leading centers for studying the quadrivium. The study of knowledge was so important at this school that the cathedral has depictions of the 7 liberal arts and great scholars of the past carved into the stone above the western royal portal. Through Fulbert, via his student Lambert who would go to the University of Paris, Gerbert would influence Adelard of Bath and Peter Abelard, both discussed in previous videos. What was it that made the knowledge Gerbert learned in Spain so valuable to all the students seeking out his teachings? Easily the biggest innovation was the Indian numerals and method of counting he brought from Spain. Our modern decimal system refers to them erroneously as Arabic numerals, a term which derives from the Muslim scholars in Spain who passed them on to Gerbert and others. Those Muslim scholars did not invent the numerals or the counting system, as this knowledge was brought from India along with the concept of zero, but when the transfer happened is unknown. Although, a Syriac Christian in the 600s named Sémhur wrote, "I wish only to say that this computation is done by means of 9 signs." 200 years later, the numerals were still not in common use in Andalusia,
as Al-Khwarizmi needed to write a book called On Indian Calculation, noting again the use of 9 symbols. In addition to the numerals, Gerbert also brought the new methodology for counting them that we still use today. Gerbert reintroduced the abacus to Western Europe, but not the type with sliding beads that people are familiar with. Gerbert's counter was a piece of parchment with lines representing the ones, tens, etc., columns, but eventually the lines would be done away with. For centuries it was debated whether Gerbert's math used Indian numerals or not, and then in 2001 a parchment with his abacus was rediscovered, numerals circled in red, confirming that he introduced the new numbers in France. Gerbert was also skilled in creating what today are called classroom visual aids, such as the abacus, to assist in learning how to count. Gerbert wrote a geometry text for his students that became the European standard until Euclid was translated in later years. He devised clever celestial spheres that improved timekeeping and locating stars, though they were not his invention as they were known in classical antiquity. It appears no one else in Europe was making them, as evidenced by Gerbert's letters to people who wrote to him asking for, or how to make one. He also made a sophisticated armillary sphere, think of a modern planetarium, which allows for accurate tracking of astronomical objects. Utilizing his various devices, Gerbert knew that Mercury and Venus orbited the Sun, but he did not take his observations to its logical heliocentric conclusion. Related to the two spheres and their uses, Gerbert also wrote a text on how to use an astrolabe to make observations. Starting in 980, Gerbert's days as a schoolmaster were nearly over when Otto II summoned him. From this point on, Gerbert would become a political animal intimately involved in court intrigues and machinations, and it was from this point forward that his surviving correspondence comes. The various plots and details are covered in the abacus and the cross. In 982, Otto II died, leaving a 3-year-old as heir, which began a fight for control of the regency between his Byzantine mother and the German nobles. Gerbert's efforts helped Theophanu gain control of her son and the throne, ruling in young Otto's name, while he returned to Reims to teach by 984. The next major political affair Gerbert became involved with was putting Hugh Capet on the throne of France. Acting as a confidant of the regent, Empress Theophanu, Gerbert wrote to her about the weakness of the current king, Lothar, and his do-nothing son, Louis V. Hugh's father had been named Duke of the Franks, and as such, the Capet family were powerful landowners and military commanders who headed a larger army than the king. Lothar had his eye on the Duchy of Lorraine in eastern France, and after Otto II died, he invaded in 984 and sacked Verdun, but without the Capet army that Hugh refused to field. Lothar took Godfrey, the Count of Verdun, hostage. Godfrey was also the brother of Gerbert's mentor, the Archbishop of Reims. However, Gerbert was able to get access to Godfrey and began relaying messages to Lothar's opponents. By April of 985, Gerbert wrote to Theophanu that his letters had been discovered by Lothar. Lothar condemned Gerbert and the archbishop to death for treason, even though his allegiance was to the Holy Roman Empire, not the Frankish kings. A month later in Reims, as the trial was about to get underway, Hugh Capet arrived with his army and convinced Lothar to drop the charges. Lothar died almost a year later, but Louis V was eager to see the traitors punished. In spring 987, Louis V marched his forces to Reims and sacked the bishop's palace, taking Gerbert and the archbishop prisoner. Gerbert wrote to Theophanu, "We beg you to bring definite aid to us, therefore, at this uncertain time, permitting no false hope to delude us who never have hesitated in maintaining our fidelity to you." At a meeting of the French, planned for March 27, we are to be accused of the crime of treason. The trial was delayed, and in the interim Louis died while on a hunting trip, falling from his horse. Hugh took control of the council and dismissed the charges, with the archbishop suggesting the nobles gather again in a week to elect a new king. Following their years of support for Hugh Capet, the Archbishop of Reims wrote, "The throne is not acquired by hereditary right, and we must elevate to it a man distinguished not only by the nobility of his birth, but also by the wisdom of his spirit, a man for whom honor is a shield and generosity a rampart." Hugh was elected king of the Franks, putting an end to the Carolingian and initiating the Capetian dynasty,
which, through later cadet branches such as the houses of Valois and Bourbon, ruled France until 1870. Gerbert was then appointed as tutor to his son, Robert II. In January of 989, the Archbishop of Reims died. Seeking stability, Hugh decided to appoint a Carolingian to the post, Arnulf, the 24-year-old bastard son of Lothar and former student of Gerbert. However, within months Arnulf would betray Hugh and open the city gates of Reims to his uncle, Charles of Lorraine, who had lost the election for the throne. Omitting some intermediate tangential details, by 991, Hugh had retaken Reims and captured Charles and Arnulf thanks to the help of the Bishop of Laon who acted as his spy, disarming the two traitors during the night and opening the gates to Hugh's men. Gerbert was then appointed Archbishop of Reims by Hugh. Skipping over more details of the battle over the archbishopric, the situation dragged on for a few more years with Hugh supporting Gerbert and the Pope rejecting the choice and insisting Arnulf be reinstated. In June 995, at another council, the papal legate, Leo, wrote a letter to King Hugh and Robert, stating about Gerbert, "The vicars of Peter and their disciples will not have for their teacher a Plato, a Virgil, a Terence or any other of that herd of philosophers." In 996, both the Pope and Hugh Capet died. The new Pope, Gregory V, was appointed by his cousin, Otto III, or at least Otto's army ensured the election of the proper candidate. Gregory, the first German pope at the young age of 25, with a powerful emperor in his corner decided he would stand up to both the French king and bishops. Gregory excommunicated Gerbert, but the French bishops, drawing upon their independence from the precedent in the Constitutum Sylvestri in Pseudo-Isidore false decretals that bishops could only be tried by other bishops, refused to acknowledge the pope's authority in the matter and Robert forbid Gerbert to cede the archbishopric. Gerbert himself writes, "The church which I was charged with governing by the decision of the Council of Bishops I am unwilling to relinquish except by such judgment." Gregory then threatened to put the whole kingdom under interdict, a censure prohibiting the sacraments and Christian burials. Further, Otto was not going to side with Robert against his cousin, and so Robert relented and Arnulf was reinstated as Archbishop of Reims. Gerbert, the scholarly teacher, never really wanted to be archbishop anyway, and so this decision had a fortuitous impact on history because of what would happen soon after. Then in October 997, Gerbert received a handwritten letter from Otto III requesting that he come to court and tutor the young emperor. Gerbert accepted Otto's invitation, where Gerbert would act as both secretary and teacher to the scholarly-minded future Holy Roman Emperor, just as Gerbert had done for his father. Being appointed as counselor to the emperor elated Gerbert. Otto, the son of a Byzantine princess and a German king, was viewed as the natural choice to reunite the Roman Empire. Gerbert, the Aristotle to Otto's Alexander, saw a perfect opportunity to shape the empire into a magnificent beacon of enlightened leadership and the pursuit of wisdom, as he had witnessed in Muslim Spain decades before. His excitement at this new role is captured in a letter. "This event will accomplish what I have always wished, have always hoped for, by making me his inseparable companion so that we can guide the exalted empire for him." However, Gerbert's time as Otto's tutor would not last long. A few months later, in April 998, Pope Gregory V made Gerbert Archbishop of Ravenna, the old capital of the Western Roman Empire and the next most important church outside of Rome. The appointment both lifted Gerbert's excommunication and was an olive branch to his cousin Otto, as Gerbert could not be reinstated at Reims. A year later, Gregory was dead, and Otto chose the highly educated and philosophical Gerbert to be the first French pope. Gerbert chose the name Sylvester II, and speculation is that he chose this name to honor the pope at the time of the first Christian emperor, as Sylvester II was pope alongside the man with the best chance of recreating the Roman Empire. Thus, Gerbert was the second Sylvester to the second Constantine. Otto even used the same imperial insignia as Charlemagne, to renew the Roman Empire. It must have been a time sizzling with unlimited potential for both men and their goals, and for those who knew them and of what they were capable. Otto was intellectually talented, called by some Mirabilia Mundi, the wonder of the world, and at his side the towering intellect of a philosopher-pope. Unfortunately for the course of world scientific history, the dream was not to last. The Romans did not approve of Otto's choice for pope, and once he and his forces left the city the Romans revolted. Upon Otto's return to the city, the Romans kept Gerbert confined to the Lateran palace and succeeded in driving Otto out of the Castel Sant'Angelo. As events calmed and protesters disbanded, Otto and Gerbert managed to get out of the city and make their way to Ravenna. On a subsequent attempt to retake Rome while Gerbert remained in Ravenna, Otto became seriously ill, perhaps with malaria. Otto, the wunderkind with so much possibility, died aged 21 in 1002. The Crescentii and Tusculum families battled for political control of Rome, as discussed in a previous video, when the Tusculum children ascended a decade later to the papacy. However, Gerbert had previously been very generous to the Tusculum family, and he was allowed to return to Rome unmolested, but he exercised no political authority and focused on church matters including attempting some reforms. Then, a year after Otto died, Gerbert also passed away, their dreams of a glorious new empire gone. Author Nancy Marie Brown speculates on what could have happened if the two had lived. The Christian empire that Gerbert imagined could have changed the course of history. As in the Spain he had seen in his youth, men of any faith would have risen to power. Trade in goods and ideas would have flourished. Justice and law would have curbed brutality and force. Instead of the Crusades, the schism between East and West, and the Inquisition, the medieval church would be known today for its arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. Given Gerbert's remarkable intellect and talents honed in Muslim Spain, it is not surprising that later Christian writers would tarnish his memory. Over a century later, the English monk William of Malmesbury would accuse Gerbert of using black magic and making a pact with the devil to achieve all the wonders with which he managed to astonish his contemporaries. Later, the noted church historian, Cardinal Baronius, would write, Gerbert was nothing but a learned man who was ahead of his time. Those who want to efface his name from the catalogue of popes are ignorant fools perverted by the schismatic Beano. Sylvester's papal librarian, the future Pope Sergius IV, wrote of his predecessor's passing, the world was darkened and peace disappeared. Adhemar of Chabannes referred to Gerbert as the scientist pope, and almost a century after his death, Abbot Sigebert of Gembloux wrote, Happy the state whose rulers are philosophers, and whose philosophers rule. Gerbert, who among those shining, shone exceedingly.
Hi, this is Jason with one personal note. I know that the Sylvester surname started to be adopted around a century or two following Gerbert's death. While Gerbert chose Sylvester in tribute to the first pope about whom I documented 2 forgeries on Wikipedia, I choose to believe my ancestor selected this name to honor Gerbert for his contributions to the world. Given how important his impacts were, I felt it necessary to give a longer and fuller accounting of his life while leaving out many other details. And given the length of this video, I opted to use a voice synthesizer to save time. Thanks for watching. Please check out the other videos on my channel if history is your thing, and see you next time.